Welcome everybody. We're going to talk about some pretty cool privacy protocols today. So I think just the easiest way to start is let's walk down the line here and everybody can introduce themselves and their protocol and their role there. So if you want to start, Alex.
Yeah, hi, I'm Alex. I'm the CEO of Aleo. Aleo is a layer 1 blockchain protocol. It basically combines Ethereum and Zcash, right? So Ethereum and Zcash had a baby. That's kind of Aleo. So permissionless, programmable, privacy at layer 1.
So I'm Harry at NIM. NIM is a mixnet. So if like Aleo is like a layer 1, we're like the layer 0 beneath it. So we basically anonymize and make private any kind of blockchain transactions, functioning a little bit like Tor or Super VPN, but we actually mix the traffic together so it's resistant against really powerful adversaries.
Hey guys, I'm Ash. I am the Chief Strategy Officer of Risk Zero. So if Aleo is a layer 1 and you guys are a layer 0, Risk Zero is a modular layer for ZK proving on top of all of that. So what we're trying to do is basically enable any app on any chain to access ZK tooling, ZKify their apps, but sort of in a modular way, not as a blockchain itself.
That's awesome. So I think one of the most interesting parts of all of this is, despite all being, like privacy protocols, right? It's very clear that all three of you have taken very different approaches to like solving this problem. You've chose to live in different layers of either the tech stack or what like a crypto stack might look like. So, I think we'll just walk down the line again here. Do you kind of want to dig more into like why you made the decision to be in the tech stack where you are? So for Aleo specifically, right, like being your own network, right, and like really focusing on making that a good experience. What are some of the decisions you and the team have made there, and why was this the direction you guys chose to build in?
Yeah, so, we initially contemplated being a layer 2 on Ethereum, but, looking at the goals that we had for the network, privacy in the permissionless setting and performant enough for clients to generate their own zero-knowledge proofs kind of led us down the road of building our own stack from the ground up. Because if you look at most other layer 2s that use ZK, they actually don't use the ZK property of ZK snarks. They use the succinctness property, right? So typically rollups use the succinctness property of ZK snarks to scale the blockchain, but they actually don't provide any privacy, right? And I think part of that is just by the nature of how Ethereum is architected, right? It wasn't built for this use case in mind. And so we decided to build from the ground up to enable specifically privacy-preserving smart contracts. I think there's been, and we, by the way, stand on the shoulders of giants. Zcash is a project that I think really blazed the trail for applying ZK for the purposes of privacy-preserving payments. And so we kind of actually view ourselves as an extension of that in the direction of smart contracts effectively. And I think there's some pretty incredible use cases that are opened up that we can talk about, but I think they're only, you can only get the ability for a client-side prover to be performant in a permissionless setting if you build from the ground up all the primitives you need to make that work effectively. So that's what led us to the decision to be a layer 1, to build our own blockchain with our own consensus, to build our own VM, which is off-chain mainly, which enables, nice features like unlimited runtime for smart contracts or for programs, right? To build our own language, which lets developers write programs without understanding what a circuit is, right? So to abstract away all the complexities such that developers who want to take advantage of privacy preservation for their users and applications can do so without needing a degree or a PhD in cryptography. And users can take advantage of those applications without needing to rely on a third-party server.
Harry, can you kind of speak to the approach you and the team at NIM took with choosing to build this communication layer, right? This similar to Tor, this L0 approach. Why was that kind of how you and the team choose to spend your time instead of taking the like L1 approach?
Yeah, so we're again a network stack layer. How many people here use a VPN? Does anyone here use a VPN? You should, if not. But the problem with VPNs is that they are essentially centralized data collection. They make your IP maybe anonymous like Netflix, but your IP address is still known to the VPN provider, and the VPN provider knows exactly who you are and where you're going. And the technology invented by David Chaum called Mixnets has been around on paper for a very long time, saying, well, wouldn't it be great if we had a decentralized bunch of nodes and they were mixing this traffic up, so even like the NSA or someone, or the Russian or Chinese government couldn't figure out who I'm talking to, what I'm doing when I use the internet. This was the original dream of a lot of people before Bitcoin, but no one ever built it. And then when I was actually at MIT, Madar's Verse and other folks were cooking up Zcash. And I read the Zcash paper, and I said, oh, zero-knowledge proofs require an anonymous channel to be truly anonymous, because otherwise you're maybe doing a prove or verifier game, and maybe you're anonymous on chain, but you just leaked your IP address and everything you're doing on the network level. So privacy is really a holistic property of a system. In order to achieve that system, you need protection on different layers. And so I said, well, and I say, why don't we build that? This may be the one time in human history where there's enough interest due to Zcash, due to Tor, due to blockchain technology in general, that people understand that you need privacy on all layers, and mixed nets are a good solution. So we decided to build that missing part of the Zcash paper and build it in a generic way enough that Aleo could use it, Aztec uses it now, so forth and so on.
Ashley, what went into the decision making where you and the team chose to be this like co-processing layer, right? This top level like framework for making things happen. I don't know if that's the right way to describe it, but what kind of went into that decision making, and why did you and the team choose to live at that point in the stack?
I think that our team is the most excited about all the things that you can do with ZK Tech once it's actually built and in an environment where it's easy developers can use. We're excited about identity. We're excited about all the ways that you can protect user data, but while also still sharing it. We're excited about all the ways it's going to change different types of data focused businesses. You've got three kind of categories when you think about what people want ZK for. It's scaling, it's privacy, which is what we're talking a lot about today, and then it's credentialing, right? And there are a few more things, but those are kind of the big three. And we realized that different developers want different things for their application. They may not want or need all of the pieces of a ZK stack. And so what we're building with Bonsai is basically a stateless modular execution environment wherein you can compute arbitrarily large programs, and then you can attest to them off-chain, and then you can attest to them on-chain. And this is just enabling the ability to just have programs that were just impossible to have on blockchains before without some serious trust, some serious alterations to the trust environment. So that's really why we chose that direction. We want to be able to just empower people to push for use cases. Right now, it's really hard to move to a new environment, learn a new language, change to a different blockchain. So we want to just provide that functionality from whatever language or whatever environment the team's already building in.
I want to follow up on something really interesting you said there, where you were talking about, how like RISC-0 kind of enables people to pick of the properties, of the ZK technology. Like maybe they want the privacy, maybe they want the credentialing, right? Like, how do you think about the new era of these privacy protocols, right? Because I think when many people look at like the legacy that's come before, we're looking at like projects like Zcash, Monero, where it was very like privacy first as kind of the product. Whereas to now, it's like this technology first, and privacy is one of those features that's available to those who choose to build into it. So I just wonder, like, what's your opinion on kind of like this moving forward moment in the privacy space?
Yeah, I mean, I think for anyone that's been following the privacy space for a long time, or is in any way related to the security world, there's no such thing as perfect privacy to begin with, and so. I think we're also starting to realize that a lot of the things that people are excited about in the ZK space don't necessarily have a lot to do with privacy, but you can offer privacy as a feature if you follow some certain subset of rules. It's much harder to follow those rules and maintain privacy, and so for some applications, it's just not worth it to build. The trade-offs that you have to make to build in private or to transact in private are just not worth the pain in the ass, basically, around the user experience. For some people, they are. So, for example, within RISC-0, we're building a decentralized proving fabric that'll allow anyone to submit proof requests and receive proofs, which will then be posted to whatever chain it is that they're on. But you can also, through our open source prover that we've released, you can also prove locally on your machine if you actually really need privacy. So I think giving people options based on what it is that they're trying to achieve is important, and that's just the tack that we've taken because of that direction.
Harry, I wonder if you think, like, as someone who's approaching privacy in a very, like, at least from the crypto perspective, like different way, right? Like focusing on this mixed net, focusing on this communication layer. Do you think these like new primitives, this new type of infrastructure layers are able to almost sneak through the door and Trojan horse the way into like having, as things are built on top of it, right? Like other things built on top of it like inherit these positive traits of privacy. Like how much of the current ecosystem do you think we can move on to these sorts of networks and infrastructures?
I mean, if you're using a zero knowledge system for privacy and you're not using communications layer like NIMS, MixNet beneath that, you're essentially building a castle on sand, because your privacy properties will be violated just by the very act of you like communicating over the internet. So before we had blockchains writing all of our transactions down, we had mass surveillance by governments writing them all down just in their database, not on a public database, right? And that can be used against you, of course. So our kind of goal would be, if you look at, it sounds crazy, we would like to make all internet communications, not just blockchain communications, private by default. And I used to work on internet and web standards with the inventor of the web, Tim Berners-Lee. That was my job for many years, adding crypto to web browsers. And, when I started that job, people thought it was crazy. And, there was resistance from governments and regulators and just confused companies about crypto. But ultimately, you can't log into your bank. You can't have Amazon or eBay or PayPal without an encrypted lock defending your network traffic. And the next obvious step in that evolution is making it sure that, I may be using Google Chrome to talk to my bank, but I don't necessarily want Google to know that I'm talking to my bank when and where I'm doing that all the time. And we think there's probably a large ecosystem innovation that can build on top of privacy enhancing technologies like MixNets and zero knowledge proofs to enable a whole wave of innovation that currently, if you look at the internet today, is kind of minus AI, which is just large language models, is really stuck. So, we do have the potential to build a privacy-enhanced internet today, and blockchain technologies is probably the last chance we will have for a long time. So we have to move now, and if we do move now and we are successful, a lot of other startups will follow us, just as, when people were creating transport layer security for the internet, they didn't imagine that there'd be this use case called Amazon, but there was. And there'll be another round, we think, of innovation like that after we've built privacy into the application and network and even hardware layers.
As we think about like building out this experience and like discovering these new use cases, Alex, I'm kind of wondering, like, Aleo has had that strong focus on, you have your own VM, right? You have your own language to make this happen, and it seems like you guys are really trying to push forward a lot of like features that become available to devs, right? So they can create these experiences. How do you think about like attracting developers and builders to like the privacy space? Because I think for a time it has existed in sort of like a niche corner of the market and like a niche corner of most fields. So how have you and the team approached bringing people on to like the stack that you're building?
Yeah, great question. So look, I think what we're building, I said earlier, is like, a permissionless programmable privacy layer. I think, the beauty of a blockchain, a layer 1 blockchain, is that it is, most of them are, and including Aleo, is permissionless by design, right? Via either proof of stake or proof of work consensus mechanism. We actually have a hybrid, but the permissionlessness nature of it means that anyone can interact with it all the time. It is always available, right? Now, if we don't care about that, if we're okay with introducing a trust assumption for execution, like, what are we all even doing here, in my view? There's plenty of systems that exist that are trusted. There's some trusted party that you can just vouch for you, right? You don't need to use zero knowledge cryptography for that. But I think to the extent that we believe permissionless systems can unlock future use cases for the web, we have to ask ourselves, okay, like, what does that look like? And I think we can look at things like Ethereum, where it's like, hey, we have this amazing DeFi ecosystem. For example, people can do interbank settlement or remittances. But then if you think about, okay, why isn't that bigger today? Like, Ethereum's been around for almost a decade now. Why aren't we using that? Like, why hasn't this replaced the financial system? And I think one of the reasons is, like, you don't have the same UX as you have for the financial system, which is like, if I wire you money, Harry doesn't get to see the contents of my account, right? That's how every other blockchain system works, right? And so I think there's a very well-motivated use case for basic privacy, even in things like DeFi, right? So I think when you frame it to developers in terms of like, hey, it's not you got to learn a whole new stack. It's here's the capability that you didn't have before. Because like I always hear people being like, oh, developers don't want to learn a new language. I remember I used to be an investor at A16Z. People used to say that about Solidity, and they're like, no way is anyone going to learn Solidity. And now I hear the opposite. Oh, no way anyone wants to learn anything but Solidity, right? The reality is developers are smart, curious people. If you provide them a use case or an application that, or a power that they wouldn't have otherwise have, I find they're very attracted to the idea of building something like this. And I think privacy does enable several key applications. Permissionless privacy in particular enables things like decentralized identity. And we have a project that we built internally called ZPass that lets people verify their age without anything other than their physical passport, right? So you can do everything in a permissionless, privacy-preserving way, verify your age to a third-party web service, for example, and all that works just out of the box. And there's no way, like that problem is hard to solve even for the regular web. So I think it's really all about introducing new capabilities and what they can potentially offer to developers is how we really have attracted the community that we've built.
Okay, well, let's have just like a fun and interesting last couple minutes here, like lightning round question. And I hope I'm going to attribute the quote correctly, but I believe it was Zuko who kind of made the distinction once between the types of privacy, right? There's privacy through anonymity, right? Where like you can see what's going on, but you can't really associate those activities with any particular parties, versus privacy through like true obfuscation, right? Where you might know things are happening, but you really don't even know fully what those things are or the true content of those things. So I'm just kind of curious, as like true experts in the space, how do you guys think about the different types of privacy and what they mean to you and what they mean to your protocols? And we'll walk down the line here and we'll kind of make it like as timely as we can.
Yeah, sure. So I think it really depends on the use case, right? I think different use cases require different levels of privacy depending on what data that you want to hide or how much you value that data. So I think it'll really start breaking down by use case. But I do think there is a pretty bright line, I think, between the current model of the internet that we've all kind of grown to accept and what I think it probably should be, right? In that we don't have to just submit to giving up all our data by default, either on-chain or off-chain. So I think, to me, we're going to evolve towards a world where privacy is going to be a requirement, but I think how much of a requirement will depend by use case.
Yeah, so the way you want to think about is that what you just said is it's unlinkability. I can't link you or myself or anyone else to a particular transaction, versus maybe unobservability, where I can't even observe what's going on. What we are working on NIM is first the unlinkability, so I can't link you to your particular internet traffic from your device. But if you think about it, in countries which are under heavy restrictions, countries that make VPNs illegal, like China and Iran, they have to obfuscate their traffic. They have to make it unobservable, so it doesn't look like you're using a VPN. It doesn't look like maybe you're using blockchain tech. It doesn't look like you're accessing a website like Wikipedia even. And people say, well, isn't that kind of crazy? But the fact of the matter is the internet was built during a more innocent time, and people felt very safe using it, and they didn't feel like they were going to be threatened for what they did on the internet. And we want to return to that time, but we live in a globally chaotic world, and privacy is necessary to maintain both our fundamental rights and, even from a government standpoint, government's own security against other governments. And this will require things like obfuscation, which we're going to roll out next year for countries that need it, eventually will have to be used even by people probably inside the United States and inside of Europe. And it will not just be because I want to hide myself from a government, but governments will need to hide themselves from other governments. It's a national security concern if you put a bunch of plain text transactions on a CBDC for other governments to know about. So we think eventually, even though there's regulators are confused and people aren't really sure why they need it, eventually privacy will be a default, and it will be a requirement for most applications, not just due to human rights concerns, but also due to national security concerns.
Go for it, real fast.
That was impassioned, and I'm with you, man. But I just want to be honest, users don't care about privacy. All the people in this crowd are literally out of privacy talk, and only about 10% of you raised your hands when when asked if you use a VPN. Users don't care about privacy. I think that privacy tech is important, and I think it will have insane adoption in the next 10 years. But I think that, like many things, like with blockchain, it's only going to be in places where it actually improves the state of the case of the things that it's being used for. So, for example, if Google Ads started implementing ZK, right now when I'm being served up a web page, every single, 90% of my previous browser history that I've ever had is being surfaced to anyone in that marketplace that's bidding to place me an ad. we could build a ZK tool which allows us to prove to the advertiser that's paying for that space that I am the exact target person that they're looking for, i.e., 30-something white American that likes pink lip gloss, and serve up that ad without without that advertiser receiving all of our information. That's the kinds of places where I see privacy tech taking over, not so much on users that are trying to protect their own data, because users don't care.
Yeah,
Protecting their
definitely.
data.
And we'll leave it off with there. I want to thank you all for coming. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thanks.